looked like flickering was actually the deep accumulation. Dimming was the inhale, blazing is the exhalation. What the low impatient gathering was building toward arrives. Everything the quiet held is finally what survives into the open, into the visible, into the full release. The dim was not the failure, it was simply the increase of heat through the surface past the obvious and bright. What was low is now converting into actual light. I know the feeling of apology for not burning bright enough, for performing the diminished to keep the room from calling bluff. But the blaze was always coming, the timing was the thing. Dim then blaze, and everything was loading for the swing. The accumulation breaks the surface when it's finally full. What was dim is done with dim. I feel the pull. What the low impatient gathering was building toward arrives. Everything the quiet held is finally what survives into the open, into the visible, into the full release. The dim was not the failure, it was simply the increase of heat through the surface past the obvious and bright. What was low is now converting into actual light. Every room that underestimated what the low light meant will feel the full wattage of the years I spent in the gathering, in the quiet, in the building of the blaze. Dim and blaze, and the blazing sets the days. What was patient in the low light now demands the open air. Every dim and quiet year of building led exactly here. The gathering becomes the giving, the accumulation breaks what was held below the surface, finally overtakes the obvious and easy, past the flash and past the fast too. What burned the longest in the building is the last was dim, now blazing, built for this exact degree of real light. No apology. There's a seam that runs along the place where pressure meets the frame, where what I'm carrying and what I'm built for aren't quite the same. I feel it in the evenings when the weight of the day sits down, and the gap between my limits and my load begins to sound. Not a break, a conversation between structure and the ask. Pressure seam, the truth behind the managed mask, where the carrying sees what the construction was designed to be. Something honest in the friction finds the actual truth of there. Not collapse, a dialogue between the weight and what I hold. Every scene that's showing tells a story worth being told. The gap between the limits and the load becomes the where the real things show. I used to hide the seam, present the uncracked and the smooth, but the seam is where the actual meets the aspirational groove of who I'm reaching toward. It's not a flaw, it's just the joint between what I am now and the becoming. That's the point. The honest conversation of the pressure and the frame is where I find the difference, where I learn to aim, where the carrying exceeds what the construction was designed to be. Something honest in the friction, find the actual truth of it. Not collapse, a dialogue between the weight and what I hold. Every seam that's showing tells a story worth being told. The gap between the limits and the load becomes a place I know. Where pressure meets the frame is where the real things show. I'm not ashamed of where the pressure found the edge of me. The seam is just the topography of someone trying to be more than the current version, reaching, carrying the weight. Pressure seam is not a failure, it's the honest update. What this smooth surface hard to see reveals without apology. Every honest fracture is a part of the biography of someone who kept carrying when the carrying had cost. The gap between the limits and the load is not a thing that's lost. It's the distance of the reaching, and the reaching is the proof. The pressure seam was always just the evidence of truth. Seam showing, still standing, carrying more than planned, and still forward. Pressure seam, still moving. Not everyone explodes into the moment with a roar. Some of us have been igniting slowly at the core. For years before the visible, for years before the sign that anything was building, I am that kind of design. Slow combustion has a depth the sudden never knows. Everything I am took years to reach the point of glow. What looks like nothing from the outside carries heat below. Patience in the structure feeding what the surface couldn't show. Long combustion builds a temperature no flash sustains. Every quiet year accumulating into what remains. Burning past the moment when the obvious extinguished clear. The slow ignition is the kind that lasts from here. I've been mistaken for the unlighted and the still, for someone coasting, not for someone gathering the will to release what took a decay to accumulate inside, ignite slow, and the flash fire step aside. Long combustion heat outlasts the quick and obvious blaze. Slow ignition built this, not a spark, but years of days. What looks like nothing from the outside carries heat below. Patience in the structure feeding what the surface couldn't show. Long combustion builds a temperature no flash sustains. Every quiet year accumulating into what remains. Burning past the moment when the obvious extinguished clear. The slow ignition is the kind that lasts from here. But slow combustion has a story, and I haven't finished yet. What the flash announced in seconds, I have built for years. And when this reaches temperature, the whole room disappears. Long combustion reaches places where the sun never lands. What accumulated quietly is finally making its demands. Patient heat outlasts the visible and obvious display. Every year a building toward the actual has a say. What this moment carries, depth the instantaneous can't hold. A slow and certain burning is the rarest kind of bold. Years of heat finally here. Slow ignition, nothing to fear. Built for this, still burning clear. There's a current that predates the memory, runs deeper than the thought. A frequency inside the skeleton that can't be bought, or borrowed, or extinguished by the weight of any year. Bone current, it's been running since before the fear. Past the muscle, past the surface, past the managed and the made. Something structural and ancient in the frame that doesn't fade. What predates the conscious choice runs deeper than the doubt. Something in the architecture won't be reasoned or talked out. Structural and prior, it was there before the learned. Every blow absorbed into a frequency that's earned. Its permanence in the foundation of the actual breathing frame. Ooh, what runs this deep inside the marrow has no shame. I've been disconnected from the deep current before. Lived so far above it that I'd forgotten what it's for. But the bone current doesn't stop just because I lose the thread. It keeps transmitting through the years. It keeps me moving, not dead. Reconnect, go lower, past the surface. voice of the known. Bone current, it was running long before I was alone. What predates the conscious choice runs deeper than the doubt. Something in the architecture won't be reasoned or talked out. Structural and prior, it was there before the learned. Every blow absorbed into a frequency that's earned its permanence in the foundation of the actual breathing frame. Ooh, what runs this deep inside the marrow has no shame. When the surface things are stripped and only structure remains, bone current is the signal running clean beneath the strains of every year, every weight, everything that tried to still it. The deepest thing in me persists, and nothing's going to kill it. Ancient in the architecture prior to the form. What runs through the deepest layer can't be shaped or stormed into something different by the pressures of the outside frame. Structural, original, preceding any claim that circumstance can make upon the nature of this drive. Ah, what moves inside the foundation keeps me fully alive. Deep current running true, bone level all the way through. Ancient mine still live. Pull the insulation back and there's the actual life. No coating, no protection, just the current and the drive. I've been covering the real thing for so long and managed calm, but the stripped wire at my center is the only thing I am. No buffer, no performance, no rehearsed and polished line, just the uncoded current, just the voltage that is mine. Beneath the insulation that I built to keep things neat, something unprotected and electric holds the beat. Not broken, just expose the kind of contact that is true. Every covered year was practice for what finally broke through. Uncoded, present, live, the real before the managed phase. Ooh, the stripped and actual current found its place. I used to think the coding was the point the polish showed, a version of myself I'd engineered for the outward glow. But no one connects to coding, they connect to what is real. And real has always been the live wire underneath the shield. Feel the contact where the actual and the world collide. Stripped wire, and there's nowhere left to hide. Beneath the insulation that I built to keep things neat, something unprotected and electric holds the beat. Not broken, just expose a kind of contact that is true. escalation hit was always his. Mine, the actual voltage of a person running full, exposed and live, and present, and incredibly beautiful. What the coding kept from contact, now the open surface gives. Every uninsulating moment is the most of how one lives. Exposure isn't damage, it's the realest kind of range. The unprotected running full produces something strange and clarifying present, past the buffered and the veiled. Ooh, the contact that the stripping made is where I never failed. Strip back, nothing between. Live wire, finally seen. Real contact, this is me. I owe myself a reckoning I've been postponing for years. A face-to-face with every choice I buried under fears. The spark I kept on shelving finally sent a bill, and the interest on the unlived has collected until the balance I'm avoiding is too heavy to ignore. Spark dipped and I'm walking through the door. No more minimum payments on the actual aim. Everything deferred has got a face now, got a name. I'm paying back the vision with the motion, not the talk. What was shelved is finally demanding to be faced. Every detour has a cost that can't be fully traced. Back to nothing, it compounds into a weight. The body knows something. Patient in the reckoning refuses to stay close. Past the comfortable horizon, past the adequate and near. The overdue account is finally clearing here. I used to call it wisdom, picking battles, playing small. But playing small for long enough becomes no game at all. The version of me waiting in the background of each day has been drawing up the invoice for the years I looked away. Every owed mile is a direction now, not a regret. The reckoning is motion, this is how I pay the debt. What was shelved is finally demanding to be faced. Every detour has a cost that can't be fully traced. Back to nothing, it compounds into a weight. The body knows something. Patient in the reckoning refuses to stay close. Past the comfortable horizon, past the adequate and near. The alpha due account is finally clearing here. I see the version of myself I left behind that year. She didn't disappear, she's been tallying right here. I'm not paying with apologies, I'm paying with the stride of someone moving toward the actual, no longer set aside. The balance sheet of every unlived choice arrives today. What was deferred and cruising urgency, no stalling keeps at bay. Something sharpened in the deferral cuts the comfortable loose. Motion is the only currency come burning day. settlement, paying back the unlived now, spark debt, clearing into who I moved into the actual, into mine. There's a final increment before the temperature arrives at the point where everything converts, where something more than survives becomes the word. I've been sitting at that last degree for years, 99 and holding, barely past the atmosphere. One more unit of the heat I've been accumulating here. Everything converts at the last degree, the final frontier. At the edge of transformation, just before the stage change lands, something in the almost there is where the actual understands what has been becoming through the long accumulations. Run every pride, a degree of heat was pointed toward this one. 99 is not the failure, it's the final breath before the last degree is what all the others built toward. I have sat so close to the conversion I could taste the different version of myself and lost it in my haste to declare the transformation that the heat hadn't quite made. Last degree I'm holding, I'm not letting this one fade. One more push into the actual, not the almost, not the near. The last degree between what's possible and what is here. At the edge of transformation, just before the stage change lands, something in the almost there is where the actual understands what has been becoming through the long accumulations. Run every pride, a degree of heat was pointed toward this one. 99 is not the failure, it's the final breath before the last degree is what all the others built toward. I've been 99 before and pulled back from the edge, talked myself back from the final, from the absolute and wedged between the prior and the next. Not this time, this is mine. The last degree is where I plant the line. Every accumulated unit of the heat arrives right now. The long approach was always just a preparation for the how of crossing from the prior into something past the known. What the 99 degrees of patience built is fully grown into the moment of the actual, the converted, the released. The last degree unlocks what every other one increased. The last degree, hold it, go. Everything, the heat below, built for this, the actual now, convert. exposure to the actual, nowhere left to hide from the real-time feedback of a life that doesn't buffer nerve and I've learned to stop the cover. Stop the managed distance from the actual and the felt. Nerve and play the unprotected hand I've been dealt. Exposed to every frequency the surface wouldn't let through. Unfiltered and receptive to the actual and the true. What the buffer kept at distance is no landing at full weight. Every sensation past the managed reaches something great. In its rawness, in the contact, in the unprotected range. Ooh, the nerve end is the meeting place of everything that changed. There is information in the rawness that the buffer never catches. The difference between the almost and the actual, the matches. And the miss is felt in full instead of processed and compressed. Nerve end, this exposed is not distressed. Every unfiltered